He has zero magic, no special powers, and the survival instincts of a house cat. So why is the kingdom's elite knight kidnapping him? Meet the useless transmigrated hero who accidentally became the kingdom's most valuable asset. At the howling, wind-battered entrance of a mountain cave that looks designed by a game developer who maxed the menacing slider, Bandit Lord Gidu had already hit his limit. Sword white-knuckled, body coiled forward in a full hostile lean, gasping out his disbelief that someone had actually found his hideout. Across the rocky clearing, Commander Illias Ratzel stood in pristine plate armor, flanked by her entire Ties Kingdom squad, locked into combat formation, and looking completely unbothered. While Guido's face cycled through disbelief before landing on a smug, lecherous grin as he demanded to know what sorcery led them here, the narrator stepped in to gently correct the record. No sorcery. The tracker had exactly one skill in his entire kit: comprehension, and nothing else. That very guy stood completely isolated in the center of the rocky path, dwarfed by elite knights on all sides, his face locked into maximum fear mode, pupils pinprick small, forehead beating cold sweat, body frozen solid. His expression triggered a hard cut to the past, specifically day one. Our protagonist had opened his eyes flat on his back on a lush forest floor, zero gear, white shirt and trousers only, staring up at a canopy of trees shimmering with magical spores and an ethereal glow that absolutely screamed tutorial zone. He blinked. Then he realized. The flora pulsed with a soft, dreamlike light, and quietly, one thought dropped in. He'd transmigrated into another world. He sat up, rubbed his face, let out the most exhausted yawn in Isekai history, then froze, sweat already forming as a deep, menacing presence somewhere in the tree line shrunk his pupils to pinpricks instantly. Being a sensible individual, he shoved his hands in his pockets and started trudging through the brush, throwing nervous glances into the shadows, while explaining to his invisible audience that the backstory's embarrassing and he'd rather skip it. Then, the bushes detonated. A massive, dark-furred bear with razor claws and genuine murder intent reared up directly behind him and roared, and he went completely locked up before his legs took over and he bolted, his mind sprinting through every option as the bear's footsteps shook the forest floor. Play dead, run, fight, before somehow landing on extending one trembling hand toward the charging predator. Bonjour, the bear stopped. One full second of the most surreal silence in this or any other world. Then it bared its fangs and roared directly in his face again, because of course it did. And then, out of absolutely nowhere, a massive, semi-transparent slime dropped from above and engulfed the entire bear in one fluid, catastrophic gulp. He stood there, jaw fully disconnected. He scrambled backward as the creature bubbled and expanded across the clearing. This massive, shifting, gel-bodied nightmare. An actual slime, flooding every inch of available space with wet, guttural sounds and a stench of active digestion so vile it had him gagging and retreating as the acidic edge crept toward his feet. He screamed and hit the deck as a violent shockwave erupted nearby and peered up through his messy hair at the amorphous, dripping creature still looming in the shadows, still processing. The bear was completely gone, dissolved, not a trace remaining, and the slime was still moving. He pressed himself against a rock wall, covered his mouth, and ordered himself to calm down. He had one skill. One. He was going to use it. Comprehend. Snapping out of the survival recap and turning to address his invisible audience in an ordinary, now fully non-glowing forest, our guy brandished the thick wooden branch he'd found and named his Spider's Nest Mower Sword Wooden, waving it with the conviction of a man who has decided a stick is legendary, and glossed over the highlights. He'd spotted armed figures in bandana and leather get-ups on the mountain who were, carrying human flesh, which had him hiding in the brush, shaking about it. He'd cried, a little, he admits, when he found a road, and carved what he insists was a commemorative message, not a scribble, into a tree to mark the occasion. He then turned to us with the specific, exhausted expression of someone who has genuinely been through it. Readers, it was terrible. Then he stepped out of the tree line onto a grassy cliff and stopped. Below him was a sprawling fantasy city. High stone walls, a towering castle, the full package. He had approximately 4 seconds to feel something like relief before a garbled voice came from the foliage behind him, and 2 fully armored knights lunged out of the shadows, grabbed him by both arms, and started hauling. He stared ahead with half-lidded, defeated eyes. He didn't even care who these people were. He just wanted to see other humans. He tried shouting to communicate. The knights understood nothing, said nothing, and simply dragged his completely limp body through the dirt before tossing him aside like cargo. Down in the castle dungeon, our protagonist sat slumped against the cold iron bars of his cell before his patience ran out, and he scrambled up to grab the bars with both hands and scream at the armored guards standing watch outside, who understood nothing because he couldn't speak their language, and neither could they speak his. He slid back to the floor, decided to just sleep, and lay in the damp gloom cataloging his personal disaster tour, bear attack, slime attack, and then when he finally made contact with other people, jail. He was mid-thought about how things couldn't possibly get worse when something hard connected with the side of his head, and he yelped. Through the bars loomed an imposing female knight in full plate armor, hand resting on her sword hilt. He scrambled backward before locating his spine, standing up and pointing an accusing finger. She had absolutely just hit him. The knight tilted her head, expression softening, and asked if it hurt. He confirmed that, yes, she had hit him with her sword, and yes, it had. And then her entire commander facade crumbled. Her cheeks went red, she smiled. It was embarrassingly soft. A wave of relief hit him. She could understand him. Maybe. And then she spun around, cape flying, unlocked the cell, and slung him over her armored shoulder with the casual carrying strength of an industrial forklift. Hanging upside down through the stone arches of what turned out to be a large building, he revised his assessment of her. Monstrous gorilla. She dragged him along without explanation, until a soft, refined voice floated down from somewhere above. Oh? Did it fail? The scene resolved into a grand, dimly lit church at night. Towering stone arches, wooden pews. And the source of that voice, Maya, stood raising a hand to her cheek in mild surprise, as the gorilla knight hollered that their captive was awake. From inside the tied-up sack he had somehow ended up in, the young man's muffled protest cut off the moment he realized with absolute shock that he could understand every word they were saying. Maya stepped forward with a reassuring smile and explained, possession spell, a spirit inside him, common tongue now active. He compared it to a famous fictional translator from his world, and Maya had no idea what he was talking about. He waved it off and thanked her. While diplomatically characterizing the knight's transportation style as brute force, Maya turned to look at Illias Ratzel. Illias Ratzel flinched. Then the young man's expression shifted to something serious. There were things he couldn't understand himself, and he doubted they'd believe him. Maya told him she was quite good at detecting lies. His eyes lit up like he'd found a party healer in the final dungeon. He dropped to one knee and asked if he could hug her. Maya, charmed and mildly flustered, told him not to tease old ladies. Illias Ratzel, standing in the background with zero patience, told them to get on with it. The sparkle evaporated instantly. He looked ahead, dead serious, and told them the truth. He came from another world. His name was still in the quiet church. Maya and Illias absorbed this in shared silence. Illias Ratzel noting the story was hard to believe, Maya confirming he didn't seem to be lying. But still, he backed himself up with the full bear and slime incident, gesturing frantically through the recap, at which point Maya's composure collapsed entirely as she zeroed in on one detail. Had he seriously just walked out of Black Demon Lord's Killer Mountain? He took a moment to object to that name on principle. Before Maya hit him with the lore, not even dragons went near that place. He filed away the news that this world has dragons under must see. Meanwhile, Illias Ratzel, whose entire brand is unstoppable and unafraid, was quietly trembling about the bear. Maya filled in the mechanics. The bear had eaten rye fruit, which causes unconscious movement towards slime nests, and the abundant fruit he'd carried down from the mountain was also rye fruit. His mana was so impossibly low that the control effect barely registered on him at all, which earned him an extremely awkward sweat drop moment. He had eaten some of that fruit. Of course he had. Maya told him he was incredibly lucky. He processed this, then asked the real question. Where was his transmigration bonus? His hidden power? His secret crest? The classic weak-looking guy with a secretly broken true ability? Maya stared at him blankly. Then she laid it out with genuine pity. She had never seen mana this low in her life. She wanted to feel sorry for him. No bonus. He pictured his stat screen. MP1. Equipment? A wooden stick. And then he immediately celebrated, because being this negligible meant the slime hadn't been serious about killing him, and safety was the most important stat after all. A hand grabbed him by the collar. Illias Ratzel, unimpressed, pointed out she was honestly surprised he'd reached town with no equipment whatsoever. He defended his wooden stick as an exquisite and trusted companion. Illias Ratzel gave him an apologetic look. Forgive me. I broke it and used it as firewood. He crumpled. His partner. Gone. Then Illias pivoted to warning him. If he'd encountered the mountain bandits out there, he could kiss his life goodbye. He nodded along and mentioned offhandedly that thank God he'd met people like that on the mountain instead. Illias Ratzel went completely still as he then calmly described finding a cave and observing several extremely grim-faced people whose entire energy screamed the bandits. Illias Ratzel grabbed his collar and demanded to know where. Where? Tell me where you saw them! She started shaking him violently, and his attempts to ask her to stop went nowhere until Maya sprinted forward, screaming that she was going to kill the kid. Illias Ratzel released him and apologized stiffly. He hit the floor in genuine emotional crisis. Maya gently asked if he even remembered the exact location. He could, actually. His wildlife period had been educational. Maya's heart melted. She offered a hug. He said yes, and please be gentle. Before that could happen, Illias Ratzel declared she had no time to stand around and announced the subjugation squad was being assembled immediately, spun on her heel, and pointed directly at him. You, lead the way. Up in the mountains, the operation was already underway. Illias Ratzel stationed tall and composed in the mountain forest, having introduced herself as a knight of Ty's kingdom, on orders to subjugate the mountain bandits, while the jagged cave entrance loomed ahead through the rocky foliage outside, crude torches flickering at its mouth where bandits held lazy guard duty outside. Guido sat on a nearby rock, deeply bored, watching a subordinate wander off into the trees, who barely dignified him with a response on the way out. Alone by the fire now, Guido slumped back and grumbled about the quality of his criminal operation to no one. He bit his fingernail. Then a sword drove itself into the earth, and a shockwave tore through the entire camp. Detection magic. and a panicked bandit immediately screamed that the knights were incoming. Our guy looked over at Illias Ratzel with maximum stress and asked if the bandits had magic too. She gestured toward the cave entrance with the confidence of someone who was never once worried about anything. He stared at her, thought about how she had physically carried a grown adult up this entire mountain, and kept his concerns to himself. The knights launched their assault in a blur of synchronized, extraordinary speed, and he quietly updated his internal notes. Every single one of these people was probably also a gorilla. Illias Ratzel turned to him, expression serious, and told him to stay close. She strode forward into the trees, and he followed with a weak, trembling nod. Inside the cave, a fully armored knight charged into the darkness, while our guy stood frozen against the wall, looking very small, jaw tightening as the scale of violence around him fully registered. Illias Ratzel dashed in at the front with a massive, sweeping sword arc, her voice bouncing off the stone walls as she laid down the rules of engagement. Don't kill the ones who surrender. Don't hold back against the ones who are trying to escape. Illias Ratzel raised their weapons in unison. Deep in the cave, a startled bandit backed away and looked to Guido for direction, while Illias Ratzel scanned the shadows for resistance, and Guido's expression finally arrived at full, boiling rage. The knights hit in synchronized waves. Then Illias Ratzel got a surprise. Stone debris exploded around her, as heavy iron chains whipped out of the darkness and coiled tight around her armor. She looked down at her captor with complete contempt. Guido strained against his own chains and managed something that probably felt threatening in his head. Illias Ratzel pulled back her armored fist and punched directly through the solid stone wall. She stood in the wreckage, calmly drew her sword, looked down at him, and noted it would be inconvenient to transport someone of his size back for a trial. She'd handle his sins right here, right now. Eyes narrowed. Strike sustained. Our guy, watching from the back of the cave, had no words. When the dust settled, Illias Ratzel landed on the cavern floor and lowered her sword. The Ragdoll squad dispersed to sweep for any bandits attempting to use detection magic to escape, with orders to bring back survivors. She then walked over to the young man, entirely satisfied. Seems like everything went without a hitch. He did not share her assessment in the slightest. She seemed genuinely confused. The knights had won decisively. Wasn't he excited by their passionate effort? He waited a beat. Then he asked, very calmly, why she had never once drawn her sword during the entire operation. Her cheeks flushed immediately. I just don't want my sword stained with their dirty blood. He helpfully pointed out he thought he saw her try to draw it, but it appeared to have gotten stuck in the scabbard. Illias Ratzel drew her sword and pointed it directly at him. The narrator cleared its throat. She waved the sword frantically, face fully red. He put both hands up and stepped back. With the cave swept and the operation officially closed on the mountainside, 7 bandits captured out of 30, the rest handled in the fight, and confirmed 0 escaped, the Tai's Kingdom squad began the march back toward the castle. Illias Ratzel walking with full professional composure, carrying our protagonist over her armored shoulder like luggage she'd forgotten she was holding, while he hung upside down in silence and quietly reviewed the absurdity of his entire situation. No special power, no mana, no heroic bloodline, no reason to be here at all. He pictured some vague floating deity somewhere, long beard, robes, shrugging, and concluded this was either God's whim or a summoning that went badly wrong with nobody showing up to apologize for it. He genuinely did not want to fight a demon lord. He did not want a harem. He wanted, specifically and exclusively, to exist somewhere safe and quiet and undangerous. As the castle walls and the sprawling medieval town came into view on the horizon, under a vast cloud-swept sky, he took one deep breath and screamed that wish into the open air with everything he had. Far from all of that, deep inside an untamed stretch of Tease Kingdom forest, a hidden camp of canvas tents sat under a dense canopy that let in almost no light. And inside the main tent, a bandit minion knelt on the dirt floor with his head bowed, voice trembling, delivering his report to the man in charge. Guido and his crew were defeated? Docolla, messy dark hair, facial stubble, dark bandit battle attire, and the ambient aura of a man who has had people disappeared for minor inconveniences. Let the information land for exactly 1 second. Then a slow, wide, deeply sinister grin stretched all the way across his face. He leaned back in his chair, this former member of the kingdom's own assassination squad, and waved one hand at his subordinate, like the news barely warranted his attention. He wasn't worried. He knew precisely how much his men feared his wrath, several dozen times more than anything else this world could throw at them, which meant they weren't idiots. He just sat there in his throne-like chair, smile chilling and fixed, completely unbothered, patient. Back in the bandit camp, Docolla sat in his throne-like chair with that slow, chilling grin already fixed on his face. A former royal assassin who had people disappeared for minor inconveniences, processing the news of Guido's defeat with exactly 1 second of consideration, and then absolutely zero concern. He knew how much his men feared his wrath, which meant they weren't making mistakes, so he just waited, patient. Meanwhile, the story hard cuts to the capital, because this plot operates on multiple fronts now. A title card for Chapter 2 slams down over an illustration of Tease Kingdom Castle before transitioning inside, where the massive, opulent conference room, tall windows, polished table, the full aristocratic power flex, hosts King Marito Teise, sitting composed at the head of the table, asking Illias Ratzel if the captured bandits gave up any useful intel. She stands tall in her pristine military uniform, salutes, and delivers the honest, career-risky answer. Interrogation is ongoing. No important leads yet. Please allow more time. That's when Leonard, a resident mustache commander who lives for these moments, makes a dramatic movement to draw all eyes to himself. He opens with a compliment about what an amazing result Lady Ratzel pulled off this time. And Illias, somehow already sensing where this is going, sits back down with the focused expression of someone bracing for professional disrespect. He doesn't disappoint. He suggests, with an insufferably condescending air, that since Illias is a woman, she probably lacks the stomach for proper torture, and offers to hand his 300-knight squad the task instead. He leans in to whisper it like a secret, then delivers a deeply theatrical non-apology. "Pardon me, I've said too much." He follows that by flexing that her elite ragdo squad numbers around 30, while his can move 300 at any moment, and wraps it all up with a smirk and a fake generous offer of backup, because he is, at his core, an intolerably smug side character. The camera visibly gives up on the political circus and pans away to take in the room's towering curtains and massive double doors, finally landing on a freshly steaming meal being quietly set on a nearby table by Grandpa Kara, who waves a gentle goodbye and exits like a man who clocked out of this meeting 10 minutes ago. The castle dining area is a completely different vibe. Our protagonist, dark-haired, visibly running on negative sleep, sits at a wooden table eating his first meal in this entire fantasy world, and he is treating it with appropriate scientific rigor. He chews deliberately, cataloging the flavor profile. Weird herb, strong fragrance, overall on the light side with the seasoning. Grandpa Kara sits across from him with pure paternal warmth, apologizing for serving last night's leftovers. The food triggers a quick flashback to the previous night's chaos, specifically the moment the kid, after a full day of interdimensional displacement and forced interrogation, had been offered a formal celebratory toast and politely asked if he could go to sleep instead. Illias absolutely lost it. But Grandpa Kara immediately went full protective dad mode, shoved clean clothes into the boy's hands, pointed him toward hot water and a towel, told him to use the space to sleep, and waved him off down the hall before anyone could protest. Back in the present, our protagonist is mentally assigning party roles, and Grandpa Kara is clearly the S-tier support NPC of this entire arc. He asks the old man's name. It's Karagugista Dmitrikovkin. Grandpa Kara. The kid short-circuits completely. Full system crash. The old man repeats it with the exact same calm. Then he laughs it off with a big wave and says to just call him Grandpa Kara. The kid exhales like he just survived a boss fight. He barely gets to finish his meal before Grandpa Kara asks what he's doing after breakfast and personally escorts him to the main hall, where Illias is already waiting with crossed arms and a concentrated expression of dissatisfaction. The second conference room of this episode, yes, there are multiple, the kingdom is doing its best, runs on a completely different energy than the first. Illias has fully dropped the stoic commander persona and is leaning across the table with barely contained desperation, essentially begging the protagonist for any idea that might crack the bandit captives before the trail goes cold. Our guy listens carefully. Then, because he physically cannot help himself, pokes that with the raw power of the Ragdo squad. Especially considering their gorilla of a leader, capturing some bandits should have been easy. Illias slumps and assures him it really isn't. She explains the actual tactical problem. The bandits run detection magic, like a proximity radar system, pinging for mana signatures to dodge any engagement with the knights and pick off their decoy transports without risk. Our protagonist immediately maps this onto his internal game HUD. It's basically a thermosensor, he confirms. Very convenient and very annoying. He suggests flipping the chase by using detection magic to track them back, but Illias shuts that down immediately. The bandits scatter magic-sealing stones whenever they flee. The spiky-haired subordinate in the background has never heard of these things, so Illias drops one on the table with a soft clack. Mana drifts toward it, starts to fizzle and dissolve, and simply stops existing. Our protagonist stares at the completely negated mana, like a man watching his main build get hard-countered. This world ships an anti-magic item that is apparently cheap enough for a child to buy with their allowance. He picks it up and mutters that mages must be basically worthless here, which confuses Illias, since they call them magic warriors locally. She clarifies magic still works if you physically avoid the stones, but in actual warfare, they just drop a battlefield-scale sealing stone to cover the entire combat area. Our protagonist stares into the middle distance and processes this world's game balance in quiet despair. He pivots. Can they use hypnosis magic to force confessions instead? No. The bandits surgically implanted sealing stones inside their own skulls. Removing them forcefully would be immediately fatal. He pinches the bridge of his nose. Then, after a beat of loaded silence, he looks up with that cold, calculated smile that means he's found the exploit, and quietly asks permission to handle the interrogation himself. Down in the dungeon, cold stone, damp air, chains. The moment our protagonist steps through the heavy oak door, the bruised, shackled bandit in the chair clocks him as a zero threat level target and immediately goes on offense. Who is this kid? Is this beansprout really the new interrogator? Has the kingdom's standard actually fallen this low? Our guy doesn't flinch even slightly. He calmly explains he doesn't need brute strength for interrogation and doesn't enjoy hurting people anyway. The bandit calls him a coward and demands to be executed, so our protagonist switches modes. He scans the prisoner, the bruises, the cuts, the documented evidence of every failed torture session before today, and quietly concludes this guy is genuinely, impressively stubborn. He drags over a chair, sits down across from the bandit with the energy of someone who has infinite patience and zero emotional investment, and points out that the death sentence is already a settled matter. The bandit slams against his chains and tells him to just get on with it, and our protagonist cuts him off mid-sentence with a single pointed finger. He leans in, dark circled eyes drilling into the prisoner,
and asks the actual question. Why would someone who's already out of moves still refuse to talk? He lays it out step by step, like a speedrunner explaining an optimized route. Bandit loyalty is transactional. The crew cut you loose the moment you were captured. Protecting them at this point makes zero mechanical sense. So the silence must mean something out there is scarier than execution itself. The bandit cracks just slightly and asks what difference talking would even make. Our protagonist grins and says it would satisfy his curiosity.
The bandit's brain fully buffers. He then sweetens the deal. No more torture in exchange for cooperation. And he's not even asking for names, just the reason for the silence. Then he stands, perfectly relaxed, and offers to just leave him to the knights if this doesn't work for him. The defiance breaks. The bandit slumps, voice barely above a whisper, and says dying doesn't matter, because whoever is running this can deliver something worse than death, an eternal fear that follows you anywhere, and physical torture doesn't even register by comparison. He screams to be killed. Our protagonist says nothing. He quietly logs that person and eternal fear as active quest objectives and walks out into the pale morning light while the screaming fades behind him. In the castle's archive room, sunlit, dusty, stacked wall to wall with ancient tomes, Sister Maya is deep in scholarly work when our protagonist arrives and immediately drops a deeply unsettling hypothetical about magic that tampers with dead souls. Maya grabs him by the shoulders, pulls him into a full protective embrace, and rounds on Illias standing behind them with full accusatory energy. Illias raises both hands in immediate defense. She did absolutely nothing. The kid quickly clarifies he sought Maya out specifically because she'd know about this area, and Maya shifts into expert mode. Yes, magic that calls back the souls of the dead exists, and yes, it is completely forbidden. Our protagonist processes this with his characteristic analytical calm. Then he makes the tactical error of musing aloud that it sounds like the kind of magic everyone would want. Maya goes completely still. She raises one finger and delivers the warning with absolute gravity. You must not say that in front of others. Depending on the country, you might even be punished by death sentence just by saying that you want it. He goes wide-eyed. She nods, confirms that this magic carries a 0% good ending rate across all of recorded history, that every single person ever revived by it eventually turned against all of humanity, and then delivers the final verdict with chilling finality. They all became demon lords. He physically recoils. Comedy sweat drops. Full loading screen. He pulls himself together and narrows his eyes. But the eternal fear the bandit described doesn't quite map onto the demon lord pattern. Maya, now fully in forbidden lore mode, adds the next unlocked entry, something called the death spirit spell. He offers to carry her books. She thanks him, and as they walk the archive aisles, she explains the spell in increasingly horrifying detail. It doesn't revive the dead perfectly. It just forcibly drags out their souls and deploys them as rotting puppets or living sacrifices. Our protagonist goes quiet and asks very carefully whether the victims retain their consciousness in that state. Maya pauses. She reads him with the look of someone who has seen too much to be easily disturbed. She sighs, says he asks difficult things. He looks directly at her, playful facade completely offline, and says it's really important. And then Maya stops walking, staring at the shelf, quietly. She says she has faced a death spirit spell user before in her own past. She and her comrades had to personally exterminate every creature he created. Most of them just dissolved with a final scream, but one of them, right before it disappeared, a decaying, barely humanoid wreck, looked at her and whispered, "Thank you." In the quiet of the archive, our protagonist goes completely still. A small, deeply unsettling smile crosses his face as the final piece locks into place. He bows politely and thanks her sincerely. As he leaves, Maya watches his retreating figure and immediately turns to Illias with a look of parental alarm.
asking her to keep a close eye on the boy. Illias nods slowly, reluctantly. Maya's assessment is quiet and precise. That boy is too used to malice, and he really knows about the darkness of the world. Illias starts to object, and Maya cuts her off gently. She knows he isn't a bad kid. That quiet closing verdict. He's a dangerous boy who can lose his way rather easily. Hangs in the air for about 2 seconds before we smash cut to our protagonist walking into a room full of shackled bandits with his arms spread wide and the energy of a man who heard none of that warning. The entire prisoner collective immediately tells him to shut up and demands to just be executed already. He sags into full comedic defeat, muttering something about kill, kill, kill under his breath, like a customer service employee on their final shift. Then the goofy act drops in an instant. He straightens up, eyes going cold and flat, and asks, dead calm, whether they're really that terrified of becoming death spirit spell victims. The room temperature drops several degrees. The bandits start shaking and stumbling over their denials. Our protagonist clocks the reaction, quietly congratulates himself on the read, and gets back on script. He steps into the backlit shadow of the high window and tells them he's arrived with a new proposal. Their scarred, light-haired leader demands to know if he's letting them go. One calm finger rises. No, but he can change their execution date. The leader stares blankly. And then our guy delivers the line that makes the entire room stop breathing. They can die as humans, at least. The terms are simple. Confess, and he personally guarantees the execution is delayed until after the death spirit spell user has been dealt with. The leader scrambles to find the catch, voice cracking mid-sentence. Our protagonist leans in close enough that the dark circles under his eyes are basically doing the negotiating on their own, and smiles. And the entire room of hardened, battle-scarred criminals collectively shrinks back in their chains, because somehow the most terrifying entity in this dungeon is the sleep-deprived kid with no weapons, a perfectly reasonable tone of voice, and a smile that does not reach his eyes even slightly. Back in the dungeon's stone interrogation room, our guy strides in with the calm of someone who absolutely did not just get enough sleep, and delivers what might be the most unhinged psychological boss fight ever attempted, with 0 weapons. The deal is simple. Confess, stay alive long enough to die as a human on your own terms, no torture, just some mandatory self-reflection time in a cell. He paces in front of Muscles McGee and Messy Hair like a disappointed professor who already knows everyone's exam scores. And when Messy Hair immediately cracks and screams that he won't believe it and he'll be executed anyway, our guy just pivots and gets right in his space to point out with devastating patience that their current situation is, in fact, already the most dangerous option on the table. Then comes the actual play. He casually drops that the hideout was found completely by accident. So just imagine, he says, if they corner the mastermind through some other source. The boss is going to look around at his crew and think someone talked, but who? He grins and lets both chained men stew on that beautiful seed of paranoia, plants himself perfectly between them, delivers the ultimatum with homework assignment energy, and waves goodbye. The moment he clears the door, the entire terrifying aura drops like a menu screen minimizing, and suddenly he's just a flustered, sweaty kid. Grandpa Kara, sporting full "I've seen too much" energy in his high-collared coat, levels him with the flattest stare in recorded history and informs him he has a genuine future as a crooked merchant. The protagonist waves it off. Illias Ratzel, still buffering, asks if any of that was actually going to work, and he answers without blinking. Probably not. Illias crashes entirely. That's when he pulls Grandpa Kara aside for the real scheme, leans in and whispers it directly into the old man's ear, while Illias frantically tries to shove her head into the huddle. The plan gets revealed to both of them, and really, what a through-and-through scoundrel. Meanwhile, Illias looks physically ill, but our guy hits them both with his most weaponized, innocent smile and asks, "Pretty please?" Grandpa Kara caves because what other options do they have? Illias sputters a moral objection, and Grandpa Kara shuts it down for the sake of the people. Cut to the dungeon proper, where a guard stands watch, and Muscles McGee is fully unraveling in his isolated cell, separated from his crew, unable to coordinate, his brain stuck on replay of that grotesque, decaying creature the protagonist showed them on the floor earlier, the thing that had begged to be allowed to die. Which is apparently the mastermind's preferred HR policy for traitors. Right on cue, Grandpa Kara casually strolls past during shift change with a guard, who mentions nobody's talked, then innocently wonders aloud if the food budget is really worth keeping all 7 prisoners fed. Grandpa Kara waves it off, no big deal, and Muscles sneers through the bars, right up until the old man drops the actual nuke. Only 3 of them get the deal. The prisoner's entire operating system reboots. Grandpa Kara explains with grocery list casualness. The guard recites the protagonist's exact logic, and the prisoner's legs give, the mastermind's promised punishment echoing back through his skull. Because the truly brutal realization just landed. The protagonist never said the deal was for all of them. He rockets to the bar, screaming that he'll talk, and Grandpa Kara strolls back, looking thoroughly inconvenienced, slides a blank sheet of paper through the bars, and explains the kid is already asleep. Muscles is furious, but the math is absolutely merciless. 3 spots, 7 prisoners, no coordination possible. So he hunches over that paper in the dark and starts writing like his continued existence depends on it, because it completely does. Later, Illias walks in looking flustered, holding the collected documents. 5 out of 7 broke, which is an insane conversion rate for a plan that probably wasn't going to work. And our guy accepts the stack mid-snack, sets the food aside to flip through it thoughtfully, then looks up at her. She unloads the question that's been building all episode. Just what kind of life did you live in your previous world? She clarifies she's grateful, but the methods, psychological exploitation, manufactured competition, basically running a full con on a dungeon of hardened criminals, don't exactly sit in the chivalry skill tree. He doesn't even flinch. That's right. Illias doubles down, pointing out that people who operate like this are basically criminals or criminally adjacent, and our guy just stands up, opens his hands, and describes himself as just a normal guy who wants to live peacefully, with the complete sincerity of someone who absolutely means it. He pours drinks, addresses her directly with Illias-san, and explains that his original world had exponentially more information access and more people to navigate than this one. Quick cut to his past life. Crowded modern streets, smartphones, the whole infrastructure of a world where reading people is a survival skill you grind automatically just by existing, which means he's encountered every type of NPC the human species has to offer. Back in the room, Illias tries a different angle. Which version is actually him? The friendly guy around her and Maya? Or the thing that just psychologically dismantled a room full of criminals? He hands her a cup and explains that she always plays Illias night mode, regardless of who she's facing, while he just adapts his behavior to match whoever's across from him. Illias stares at him like he revealed a second hidden class she wasn't prepared for. So he just becomes evil in front of evil? He corrects her with half-lidded, completely unreadable eyes. Not evil, just someone who understands evil. The room goes quiet, and she closes her eyes, letting that one land properly before nodding slowly and finding exactly the right word for it. That's just like a warped mirror, isn't it? And our guy just raises his cup in the chandelier-lit parlor with the most infuriatingly relaxed expression imaginable.
The video ends here, but the story isn't over yet. Like the video if you're ready for the next part.